anyway, so welcome to everybody, and we'll say hi to our guests. And I'm gonna have to make you remind me of your names in a minute, but we'll also say hi to the audience. I see we've had at least Pam and Rhonda were here. May have been last week, may have been the week before. I'm not really sure, but anyway, Pam says she's here. Good to see you again, Pam. Thank you again so much. We enjoyed our day with Pam. She took us all around Halifax. We had such a great time. So thank you very much again for that, Pam. And today we're going to talk with, so let me get you to introduce yourselves again.
I'm Katie.
I'm Houston.
And so we're the Vandergriffs, and our social media handle is Downs and Towns pretty much everywhere.
Well, very nice. Yeah, I like that. It's just so much easier. You can keep it fairly standard, when you're doing stuff. So let's start off with this. What do you really like to do, Houston? Because I know that there's something that you do a lot of.
You like to take pictures?
Yeah, I take pictures.
Yeah, I was
Houston's
gonna say,
a travel photographer.
Yeah, and you take excellent pictures. Like I said, I wish I was a photographer. I don't have the eye for it. If you talked about my photography, people would tell you I take snapshots because I pointed at something and click. But my wife is like, well, let's frame it, and so I let her do that because she's good at it.
But even the snapshots, the point and clicks are pretty important. For what you guys do, like traveling around. If you don't have the snapshots, a lot of times you forget those moments. So anyone can be a photographer. It's just sort of mainly a mindset on wanting to capture that moment in time.
Yeah, and I like to do that. We take very structured pictures about some things. Like we probably take more pictures of bathrooms than anybody else on the planet. But when you're in a wheelchair or you have some kind of mobility issue, understanding the bathroom is what it's going to be like is pretty important. Especially if you're traveling, going to stay in a cabin for a week. It's pretty nice to know that you'll be able to get in there with your wheelchair. And in fact, it was interesting at the show. I told them, and for everybody else that didn't know, I was at Abilities Expo. But this friend of ours, Sylvia Longmire, you'll see her all over social media, and she posted a thing on LinkedIn the other day because it was a picture of the roll-in shower she had, and part of it was blocked by the sink vanity, and then they had put the seat in backwards so that it would block. So basically, it was like, okay. She said she'd gotten to be an expert at washcloth baths because of stuff like that.
Sylvia, it gets to be a very small world. She's actually a friend of ours too.
Yeah.
We live in Tennessee, and we know Sylvia lives in Florida, but we got to meet her in Portugal earlier this year. We went on an influencer trip with an accessible travel group in Lisbon, Portugal, and Sylvia's amazing. She's a beautiful advocate for people with disabilities, and so we got to spend a week with her, and we love her. And we did see her video too. It's she brings up things that that we're mobile, and a lot of times it's just hard to picture what somebody in a wheelchair would deal with, but she is such an advocate that we've learned a lot spending the week with her and then following her since then.
Well, then you guys met another friend of mine, Christy Durso, because she was on that trip as well.
Yes, it was. Yes. It was an amazing trip. The trip was sponsored by Tourism for All in Portugal, and they started out providing services, or they do provide services for people with disabilities, physical and intellectual disabilities, there in Portugal. And they started getting requests because they have vehicles, buses and vans that can carry wheelchair users. And so they started getting requests from the cruise ships that would come in and ask if they could, help around. So they saw a real need and they have filled it. And if you look at Portugal as a country, it's incredible what they've done, because they have Roman ruins that go back obviously 2,000 years, but yet they've made every monastery, every cathedral, every castle is all accessible. And so we spent the week with Christy Durso and Sylvia Longmire and 3 other wheelchair users, and Houston was the only one there with an intellectual disability. but we had a blast. They're doing so many cool things there, and it was fun to get to be a part of, and fun to get to showcase that.
Okay, so I know a lot about you, Houston, but why don't you tell the audience where you've been and what you've taken pictures of that's been interesting?
How old are you?
25.
Houston's 25.
Okay.
When he finished high school, we were trying to come up like everybody does. What are you going to do with your life? And we went through as a family. We've always liked to travel, and Houston has always been the one with the camera. You mentioned about you're the one that takes the snapshots. We'd give Houston the camera back in the day. We disposable film cameras on our trip. One sister would write stories about our day, and the other one would draw pictures, and Houston would take photographs to be able to, we put together scrapbooks quite a bit from our different adventures. And he's got a really beautiful view of the world, and it's been fun to get to see how that has grown in the last few years. He's dedicated a lot of time to learning how to do photography better. He did a professional program through our local university, University of Tennessee, because we live in East Tennessee. But they have a professional program for photography. And so it was almost 200 hours of photography classes, portfolio reviews, field trips, mentoring, and lots of classes. And that has really helped him to hone his eye as a photographer. And then from there, it's just kind of blossomed into a fun career for our whole family.
Oh, very nice. That again, it's interesting. Like I said, the difference in a photographer and a clicker guy, like snapshot guy, because like I said, my wife is like that. She'll look at something and then she'll look at the camera and she'll zoom in, zoom out. I'm like, picture. Yeah.
I saw one of Houston's mentors is a photographer in New York City, and he was doing a presentation recently, and he was talking about seeing the world as a photographer. And he said a lot of times you don't even have to have your camera, but you're always paying attention to the light, the way something, the light is falling across something, or you're paying attention to how the composition may work or may not work. And so you're almost always taking pictures in your head, even though you may not have your camera with you. And I think Houston's really reached that point in his life. A lot of times we'll just be driving down the road and, we'll notice the beautiful sunset or, how something
is sunrise.
The sunrise. We don't see very many sunrises, but we like them when we do.
Yeah, in fact, it's interesting because the one thing that I take a lot of that Cheryl's not usually up for is I take sunrise and sunset shots and videos on the cruise ship. There's something about the sun coming up. Now, if the sky is perfectly clear, it becomes much less interesting. Except, just before, just as the light starts to get bright enough, you can see the horizon. It's not too bad. But you throw some clouds up in the air, either, in front of you, behind you, and then it becomes can be just absolutely amazing.
No, I'm gonna have to disagree with you a little bit. I'm thinking you might be more of a photographer than you're giving yourself credit for. If you're paying attention to the clouds and the sunrises, you may actually not be a clicker after all.
Well, I know what looks pretty to me. I mean, I see pretty, but I am not very good about necessarily framing things. If I do any framing work, usually it's me cropping in the afterwards, and I do a little bit of color correction and some of those kinds of things. But Cheryl, when she takes a picture, she's much better with composition because to me it's I'm like, okay, it looks good to me.
Yeah, that's good to you.
Houston and I have done photography workshops for individuals with Down syndrome in different places, and we've kind of narrowed the tips down to 3 things. So I guess it's probably good for us to share those with you.
That'd be great.
They're pretty simple. Yeah, the first one is have a subject. Before you click, think about what is my subject. Is it the sun coming up over the ocean? Is it the sun coming up over the front of the boat? Is it a palm tree, or is it, whatever it is, your subject, if you consciously think about it and intentionally know what your subject is, your pictures are going to be automatically better than 90% of what anybody else takes. Because it's really easy, like you were saying, just pick up and click. But if you truly think it through and think about what is your subject, it makes your picture very strong. And then the second thing is, how can you draw attention to your subject? And that's where a lot of the composition, they call them rules, but it doesn't have to be rules. It can be just composition hints, maybe, that can help make your picture stronger. Is whatever your subject is, how do you draw attention to it? And that's where light and leading lines and things like that. And then really the third thing is just simplify. And if you look at somebody who is a snapper, a clicker, quite often you'll see the trash cans and you'll see the signs overhead and so much. But if you look at a really beautiful picture, it might just be one thing. It's obviously what that subject is and how you draw attention to it. And then you cut out anything else that is not important to your subject. And then kind of an extra bonus thing is to have a story. And if you've got a story in your picture, all of those things work together to tell that story. And a lot of times the ones that are the most powerful are ones that make you ask questions. You want to know more. Where was that palm tree? Or where was that sunrise? Or whatever it may be.
Or a house.
Yep, a house or a person or something. It draws you in and just makes you, it either tells the story with that picture, or it makes you ask so many questions that you have to know more. You want to know more about it.
Okay, so let me ask about for you guys traveling. What is travel like for you guys?
You like to travel?
Yep, I do.
What's your favorite?
No one cares about it. It's better.
Yeah, Paris. Yeah, I think for us as a family, we've always traveled. We homeschooled, and so we always used to include travel. When we studied about the Revolutionary War, then we took a trip up to Williamsburg, and we took a trip to Lexington, and we took a trip to, where Paul Revere did his ride. And we've been to the top of the Eiffel Tower and to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And for us, with Houston, definitely hands-on learning and experiential learning is way better. But I'm not sure that that's not true for everybody. And so we are big believers in living the experience, not just reading about it in a book. And so for us as a family, we started out with, small trips, and then we made bigger trips. We've been to Canada through Nova Scotia driving from here. We've been to the Grand Canyon. We've been to Yellowstone and Glacier National Park, all trips, that we've made, kind of like a big clover leaf around the country. And so Houston's been to 49 of the 50 United States. Which one are you missing?
Alaska. It's fun.
Alaska, yeah. I was born in Anchorage, so we'll get there. That's definitely on our bucket list.
And it's interesting because Cheryl and I cruise a lot. In fact, we just came back from our 24th cruise since the pandemic. But because of what I do, I have to be traveling. If I take videos at my house, it doesn't, it's not very helpful to the audience. So that's part of it. But I tell people, if I could only cruise one place the rest of my life, it would be Alaska. And for a photographer, you'll go nuts up there. It is just so incredible. There's some places. So for photography, there are places I can suggest. In Juneau, obviously Mendenhall, and Mendenhall is shrinking really fast. We were there 3 years ago, and then we were back last year, I guess it was. And I bet the glacier's down 15 feet below where it was, in just the 3 years, and it's retreated back quite a bit. It's funny because right now it's probably a quarter of a mile, might be a half a mile from the visitor center to where the end of the glacier is. And they said you used to be able to just almost touch the glacier from the visitor center. So that's, it's how far it's backed up. And there's now a really nice waterfall there. It's really pretty, but so that's a good place. Another place that I love is Skagway, because when we go, we'll do one of two things. From Skagway, we will drive in to the Yukon Territory. You go up over White's Pass, and if you've ever studied anything about the gold rush, that Skagway was the main port where people came in going into the gold territory, and they had to go up over White's Pass, and they used to have to cut steps in the snow to climb. It was that steep, and they had to carry. I want to say it was 1,000 pounds of gear up that. Nobody can carry it at once, so it's carry it up, put it there, go back down, get some more up and down. But then you go over, and when you get up on the top, there's all these little. To call them lakes is probably not right. Maybe moraines or something else, because they're basically just scoured out rock that catches water. But there's enough water and stuff that runs into them that they make little rivers, and then they turn into big lakes. And the very north end of the Yukon River, which is what everybody floated down to get to the gold belt, is in Fraser. So anyway, all of that area is beautiful. The world's smallest desert is up there. It's a mile square, and the wind scours out sand and drops. It's kind of like the bottom of a Dyson vacuum cleaner. That's where all the sand winds up, and so you're going along, and it's forests and trees, and then all of a sudden there's trees sticking out of the sand, and all of a sudden it's sand dunes. It's not really a true desert because it's too humid, but it's and then just past it, there's a lake called Emerald Lake that has on a sunny day, it has the most amazing green color to it. There's some kind of a chemical or a mineral in the water that causes it to turn this beautiful green. So I go up in there and we take a lot of photos. I wouldn't recommend taking one of the bus tours because they don't stop enough. First time we went up there, we probably stopped every 50 or 100 feet because there was something new to take a picture of, something to look at. You'll run into, in the spring, we run into bears along there every once in a while. My wife gets mad when I get out to take a picture. I don't get close to them, but I just, it's a whole lot better.
You don't mess with Alaska bears.
It's a whole lot better to take the picture outside of the car than through the windshield.
Yeah.
I'm that much of a photographer. Let me say hi to a couple of people. We got Rhonda Jacobs from Moscow, Idaho. So welcome, Rhonda Jacobs. And Rhonda Wilson is with us from Lakeside, California. And Pam is here from Halifax. Well, she didn't really live in Halifax. I already forgot the name of the town, but it's not far from Halifax. And that is beautiful country too. I can understand wanting to drive through there. When we went, we stopped in Sydney in Nova Scotia on our way back before we went to Boston. And I mean, that whole island nothing is close. And we only had like 6 hours there, and I didn't want to spend what they wanted for a tour. It's the kind of place I'd rather go up and drive myself. But they have like a Scottish Highlands area and all kinds of stuff. We saw really cool old forts. Montreal has the Chateau Frontenac's way up on top of a hill. And then above that, and it's funny because the deck for that area is built over the ruins of the fort, and they have like little places you can go down and get in, tour inside. But then it goes up like 3 levels up to this old fort up at the top, and the view is incredible from up there. You can see all of that valley just about. Really cool.
And that's in Montreal?
That's no, I said Montreal. It's in Quebec. I'm sorry. Quebec. Okay. Yeah. I don't know why we were supposed to fly into Montreal. I guess and we decided to cruise up instead. So I guess that's thought is stuck in my head. So you said Paris is your favorite. How do you like to travel? Do you like road trips? Have you done a cruise? Let me ask that first.
Yeah. Oh, I love cruise.
We've never done a cruise. We actually, you had mentioned about talking about disability and traveling with a disability. With an intellectual disability, it's really, truly different from a mobile disability. We've been hesitant to be part of a group just because we haven't wanted to slow down a tour group. You mentioned about 6 hours and, timing and things. And we generally tend to move at a slower pace. We definitely are enjoy the journey kind of a family. So we've been hesitant to do tours. Mostly we just do it on our own. But within the last year, Houston and I spoke at a travel conference in Las Vegas last year. And we met the owner of a travel company that's based in Australia, but they do adventure trips all over the world. And he tracked us down afterwards and he said, I want Houston to lead trips for us. And it's like, well, we've never even been on a tour before. But now we've done one, and we're got our second one is booked for Costa Rica in January, and we went to Egypt this summer as part of a tour, and it was amazing. And now I'm really sad that we've not done this for many years.
Sad about heaven.
I know. I feel like we've missed out on a lot of things because of not, of being hesitant to be part of a tour. But the trip to Portugal with Christy and Sylvia really opened our eyes to the fact that everybody has different needs and everybody has different requirements. But if you accommodate one, quite often it can benefit everybody. And so what we have found out is that sometimes things where you may actually have to slow down to spend a little bit more time doing something, that's okay. Quite often that benefits the whole group. And so now we're not hesitant to be part of a tour group. So we're actually looking forward and making plans for the next places that we're going to go. And in 2024, we're working out a schedule for the year.
Well, very cool.
And we may have to put a cruise on that list now because it sounds like you guys are big believers in that. And
well, the amazing thing about a cruise is you can go to multiple places and only unpack once. You're not having to always. It's like when you take a lot of land tours. You're you're here for a day or two, and so you got to pack up, load up, unpack, pack. And I love cruising because you just get on the ship. So for 14, well, we did move cabins, but if we hadn't changed cabins, we could have left everything where it was for 14 straight days. And what I will say is I like food. And in general, cruises have all the food you'll ever want.
And I know that.
Yeah, you're talking Houston's love language.
Your language are.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, because I have done interviews with all of the, pretty much all of the cruise line ADA people, all of them also focus on disabilities other than mobility. We run into more mobility, and I talk about mobility because I know mobility better. But there's a group called Autism at Sea, and what they do is they provide escorted tours for families with autism, and they'll basically take care of the child for part of the day or whoever it was. But even the cruise lines themselves, what they do is they have pretty much trained the staff to understand the whole spectrum of things that people might because people take their parents with dementia, and so you have these people that may be in a situation and may behave differently than people around them would expect, and the staff's been trained to understand. Usually one of the things they'll do is like a lanyard, like a sunflower lanyard or something. Some of them have when you carry your phone with you, it tells, it basically lets them people, their staff around know who you are. And, it works really good when you want somebody to bring you food and you're sitting out on the deck somewhere and your food just shows up where you are. It's pretty handy. But, so they're pretty much very conscious of that. They're conscious of people that travel with, that might have hearing issues or sight issues. We were on a Princess cruise to the Panama Canal, and there was a pretty good sized group. I think about 30 blind people that were traveling together as a group. And what they did is they brought them on the ship first and gave them a tour and helped get them oriented so that they knew, some places that if they got to there, they knew where everything else was, in relationship to that. And, so the cruise ships are very good at trying to accommodate whatever somebody needs. And I was surprised they did. It went way beyond what I expected when I started doing the interviews. So it was
that's really cool. We learned about the Sunflower program. We were speakers at a travel convention in Savannah, Georgia, just a couple months ago. And we met a lady who was marketing or, publicizing the Sunflower program. And we were not aware of that. But I have a mom who's deaf, and we have multiple friends that have autism. And so that's a brilliant way to be able to say, what's going on. With Houston with Down syndrome, when he was born, the geneticist said that they wear it on their face. And, I came home and I cried for 2 days because I thought that was a terrible thing for her to say. But it was actually, it's a blessing. People see and understand, or tend to understand a little bit more that they're dealing with something that's a little bit different. And it makes it really nice. And a lot of times what we have found is that because Houston has Down syndrome, and it's visual, then it works really well in like print marketing or video marketing to say that yes, we do include disabilities. We embrace people with disabilities, and we're willing to break down typical stereotypes and just be able to, again, embrace all types. And diversity is a beautiful thing, especially when you're traveling, because that's when you really do get out of your comfort zone, when you really do spend the time seeing different cultures, and you said eating different foods, and trying different things. It's great to be able to include a wide variety of people.
It is, it's kind of interesting because Cheryl and I were in the Dominican Republic. I think it was in May. All the trips run together, so I just, but back in the late spring anyway. And the hotel there was actually filming. They filmed us. We were there. You could say we were on-screen talent. I asked them if I was going to get a SAG card, and they just laughed. But because they wanted to film somebody that traveled with a disability and had mobility issues to showcase their accessibility. And I had a conversation. Forget who I was talking. Oh, I talked to a rep on Cunard on the Queen Mary about the fact that I said, look at your advertising, and when you look at advertising, what do you see? You see beautiful, young, healthy people. And on this ship in particular, I said, I'm too young for this crowd. Well, and I'm 70. But it was funny because it is, and part of it may be the difference in culture from Britain to the U.S., but it is, it was, I don't know how to say this, it was very much big band, orchestra music, and I like more contemporary music. There was one duo on board that we saw kind of the last day we went into one of the restaurants to eat, and they were in there playing a little bit of well, I'd call it my music, because we grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and I'm pretty convinced they stopped making music in the 70s or the 80s, and they only started in the late 50s.
Houston is a big fan of 80s music.
Yeah.
We think it did go up until the 80s at least.
Yeah. But, and, again, part of it is what you grow up with. But it was like this whole ship was, and I've never seen so many books in my life because, every room was full of people reading books. And I like to read books, but I don't read books when I'm traveling. I'm walking around the ship. I'm taking pictures. I have other things that I want to do. The coastline sliding by makes good pictures. Just all of those things. And so it's. Rhonda said.
One of the things that Houston and I do is we serve on the Travel Ability Board. It's a nonprofit business to help promote diversity in travel with specifically with people with disabilities. And one of their big mantras is the fact that we're all aging into a disability. So even though we may have 20/20 eyesight, eventually we're all going to need reading glasses. Even though we may be fully mobile now, there's going to be a time when that football injury becomes a knee replacement or a hip replacement. That the fact that we can hear right now, but we like loud concerts is going to affect our hearing. Whatever it is, we're all going to be there, and much sooner than we think. And so it does apply to everybody, even though you might not think it affects you as a person. It does, and it will, and it can. And I think even right now the numbers are like it's a 20% of the population has some type of a disability. And if you're looking at the travel market, that's a huge part of the market that if you can serve that really well, that can boost your bottom line tremendously.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's really something that we've tried to do. You mentioned the Dominican Republic. We went there for a mission trip several years ago, and they had a deaf church that had been essentially underground. because there was a dictator in that country that if a person had a disability, they would just do away with them. That was way easier for them to have to deal with it. And so a lot of the people with disabilities truly were hidden. And, you know, even in Guatemala, Houston and I went there, we worked with a special needs school. People with Down syndrome still are kept away. It's not not a thing. And so it's it's sobering to see in different cultures, but it's also encouraging to see that maybe we can be an encouragement. You know, maybe what we're doing can change not just here and, you know, not just what we deal with, but hopefully what other people are dealing with as families or a person with a disability or communities. We hope that we can kind of share our stories. And it's the same, you know, we all have a story. And the more we can share our stories and the more we learn of other stories, it's so empowering for all of us. It's a good way for us to be able to, you know, use an example and say, well, yeah, you know, there's this woman in a wheelchair and she's been on 24 cruises since COVID hit. You know, whatever. I mean, that's empowering. That's empowering to someone who may be sitting in their recliner at home, afraid to go out because they're afraid of what they might encounter. And so that's what we have tried to do with Downs and Towns and kind of with our journey, is just to share it as we go, similar to what you do. We don't do quite as well, but it's encouraging to see that people are listening, but it's also interesting to see that we all still have a long way to go.
Yeah, you know, and let me read this comment from Rhonda Wilson. She said, "Katie, thank you for the advocating you do for those of us with disabilities. Missing thanks, Doc. I'm not sure exactly, but she says she's missing Cheryl tonight. I hope all is well with her. She's just tired. We've been sitting. She's been in the car or in her chair pretty much all day, and she doesn't sit well. That's like we talked a lot about this with the folks on Cunard. Is that we're going on a cruise to the Mediterranean in 25, and to do that, we're going to have to do a crossing cruise over, you know, and then go on the cruise in the Mediterranean. We'll probably do a little bit of land touring and then come back on a crossing to get back because she can't fly. It's either that or we fly to New York and then we fly to Reykjavik in Iceland and stand a night or two, and then we got to fly from there to London, and by then she's going to be worn out, you know. So it's like, as you said, we all deal with it, and it's interesting that what you just said about the size of the population. I just wrote a piece on LinkedIn about the you know, the fact that by the time you factor in the current disabled market, which is about $58.2 billion in disabled travel, and that was in 2022. Then, you know, the biggest and the largest number of travelers right now and for a while into the future are the baby boomers. And I didn't realize this, that the average baby boomer is typically has around $1 million in you know, in their account. You know, and now I'm obviously not an average one because you know, I have to scrape pennies to be able to travel as much as we do. That's because I can't get Rhonda and Pam to pay for my trips. I don't know. That's just the way they are, though.
Yeah, well, people have quits. Well, it'll be like that. So.
Yeah, it is. For us, it's worth it. For us, it's worth it to scrape the pennies to make the trips because it is something that's so different from just sitting at home. And when you're at home, the days go past and you don't even remember one from the next. But on a trip, you can remember details of things that are just like magic that if you were home you would just take totally for granted. So yeah, we're big believers in travel at all cost, whatever it may be.
Well, and I agree with what you just said too. It was interesting. I want to go back to one other thing you said because I love that too. You were talking about that in some cultures they hide it. In Mexico, it's you don't see a lot of people. It's really hard to find you know, accessible facilities there. They don't do much to make it where it's easy. Sylvia gave a speech at the Abilities Expo yesterday about traveling with a disability, and she talked about the fact that when she went to China, that she didn't see anybody with disabilities, because they keep them all hidden, and everybody was staring at her chair because they just didn't even understand what that was. It was like she was beamed out of a spaceship to them. And then people started talking to it. Right? Okay. So
yeah,
I got Pam said, ha 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 ha.
I think that we all actually have a responsibility to share stories and to help educate.
Yeah,
because that's unfortunate. When we're talking, this is 2023. The fact that anywhere in the world someone in a wheelchair would be unusual, that's just kind of sad. And that somebody with intellectual disability doing things, living life, traveling.
Well, October 14th now.
It's October, yes. And
yes,
14th. It's really unfortunate that is still some of the view in society. For us, what we're seeing now in the community with Down syndrome is they're using prenatal testing to use that as a reason to abort a baby. Because if they receive a Down syndrome diagnosis, you mentioned going to Iceland, it's 100% abortion rate for a baby that's diagnosed with Down syndrome. And it's not that much better in the United States. It's around 70%. And when we look at that, that's just the wrong place to draw the line. Wherever your views on abortion are, they're making the mistake. And so we just feel really strongly about sharing our story all over, because people are making life and death decisions even based on that. That's probably a little deeper than we need to get into with a travel talk show, but it does kind of give you a nice, I'll say an overview is not the right word, but you see that people deal with disability all over, and you see that people deal with it differently. But the more that we're out there, the more cruises that you guys take, the more trips that we have, the more people that we interface with, I just think it's going to be all the better. I think it's going to be all the better all the way around. And if each of us, if Sylvia's doing her thing and Christy's doing her thing and you guys are doing your thing, eventually it's just a thing. It's just accepted as a thing. And that's what we all kind of aim for.
Yeah, it was interesting. I got a couple comments here. Pam and Rhonda are talking. Rhonda said her pockets weren't that deep. She can't afford to take me. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And then Pam said that her brother was 52 and has Downs, and that her sisters and she took him on a Disney cruise a few years ago. It was fabulous. And I'm talking staff, the ship, the land things that we did. And then she made this comment. She said she'd like to take him on another cruise and do the Canada New England trip. And then she asked Houston, she says, Houston, you would love a cruise. LOL, laughing out loud. And then Rhonda said, talking about selection determinations, it's crude. Yeah. Anyway. And it was interesting because I did an interview with a gentleman, Ian Price. And he, is a quadriplegic. He has to travel with a respirator, and he goes and does stuff. He was talking about a trip he made. He was out in the middle of, Laos and Thailand and Cambodia, and they didn't have the stuff he needed, and they just figured out how to make it work, board to get his wheelchair up into the thing. And, and somebody said sometimes you're safer driving on the street than you were trying to drive down the sidewalks, but the point he made of it is this: you can go and do, and you think about his challenge, but he goes and does. I'll tell this story that I love, because one of my it's probably the favorite story I've heard doing interviews. This woman, and she's a young woman. She was in New Zealand traveling by herself and running an adapted van. And she was out in the back country in New Zealand going down, I guess, a dirt road. And she managed to, somehow something happened and the vehicle rolled over into like a gully. And it landed on its wheels. She wasn't hurt. And she could start it and drive it, but there was a gate she couldn't get through. So she had to work her way, drag herself up the embankment, and she was waving her purse to the vehicle coming, because they don't come by very often where this was. And they stopped, and first thing they said, "Are you hurt?" And she says, well, I'm paralyzed, but I was paralyzed before the accident.
Oh, God.
Was that by chance Ashley Olson?
Oh, it was. You know Ashley?
Yes, she went with us to Portugal also.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She is amazing. And we stayed an extra week in Portugal after our influencer trip. And Houston and I just stayed in the city. That was kind of brave for us. But Ashley took off and she went to the, I don't know, Azores and all over. She's a Wonder Woman when it comes to getting around by herself in her wheelchair. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. And like I said, she's a lot of fun. Oh, good morning, Kim. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. And again, the point of all of this is, and for those that are listening, if we haven't talked about the challenge you face, what we can tell you is if you look around, there's people, probably with the same problems you deal with that are out there traveling and having a good time. And all you got to do is look around and find. I have a Facebook group. Got about 700 people. Have a variety of different challenges they face. We've got people that are deaf, people that are blind. And I'm bad about sometimes not doing as good a job of captioning pictures as I should be. I wind up going way too fast, but the video is auto caption, so that's nice. But collectively, there's a bunch of stuff out there to help. Facebook's amazing because if you look for Facebook groups of people that travel with some kind of disability, the odds are really good. You're going to find one that matches what your challenges are, and you watch how other people do it, and you listen to their stories. It's incredible because you can go into. You just got to decide that you're going to run into situations that it's like, in fact, Sylvia said, that she runs into situations that are uncomfortable. She says she just deals with it.
Yeah, we have friends that actually just got back from a cruise and they're not disabled. They don't have any physical issues or anything, but yet they said up front, they knew they were going to have a hard time. They knew they were going to have a difficulty adjusting. They knew they were going to have problems. Well, of course they did, because you always do. Your debit card's always going to get held up at the bank for some reason. There's always going to be some kind of issue. But to them, it was almost debilitating because they knew things were going to go bad, and they did. And I'm not going to mention names of that because, not to point fingers, but you just want to go, you're able-bodied, you can figure things out, just go with the flow. But I think it's almost a self-actuating prophecy.
Well, I firmly believe
things are going to go wrong. And I think with a disability, I think you could get in that same boat and think, oh, I can't do that. Oh, this is going to happen. But it's so much better if you just go do it. And yeah, things are going to happen. And yeah, you're going to have issues. But so what? You're going to have issues going down to your local grocery store. So just do it and work through it. And we've met some of the most amazing powerhouse people. It's funny that we've mentioned so many of the people that we have mutual friends already, but it's, look to people that are doing it, learn from them, but then just get out there and do it. And that's kind of where we are. And it's a fun place to be.
Okay. I don't know if I started typing. I guess I didn't. I'm going to put up your website. Let's see. Downs. Let's see if I can spell it. downsandtowns.com, right?
Yep.
That's right. Yep.
Is it it's Downs and Towns, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
And all of our social media is that. So we're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Yep. We're on that for all of it.
You be out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and what I would say for everybody that's watching, whether you're watching it now on the live show or you're watching it on the replay, because we get a lot of traffic on the replays, is check out his site. He's got some amazing photos there. And like any other creator, having people come to the site is good for traffic, good for lots of reasons. So I'm sure they would appreciate it. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come talk to me. It was, I've loved our conversation. Like I said, I love talking to people. We talk about travel and problems all day.
Yeah, one of the things that's common with Down syndrome is low muscle tone, and that makes speech difficult a lot of times. So Houston's still in speech therapy, and sometimes understanding speech is difficult and hard to do. But we found that's really not a disadvantage when it comes to different languages and different cultures, because he's kind of used to not being always understood.
Yeah.
And that's really been an advantage to traveling to different places when you may not be able to communicate with the language, but you can always communicate in different ways. And so that part of traveling has been a lot of fun for us.
Yeah.
And look, there's Tom.
You tell.
I don't know. Like,
Houston's not taller than me, but I'm laying back on a couch. Here, I'll sit up straight too.
Tonight, I got it.
We're getting awfully comfortable.
Yeah.
It's been an honor to get to talk to you and to be a part of what you're sharing with your stories, because again, we're just big believers in sharing what you're doing as each individual person, because together, we may just be one little drop, but we get together and we can make those ripples in the pond just get bigger and bigger and bigger and go further and further. And there's so many outdated stereotypes around all the disabilities that there's no excuse for it to be there anymore if we can, again, share our stories.
And Rhonda Jacobs said, beautiful photos. I was able to view some of them on social media, and so very good for that. Houston, she thought they were very pretty. I thought they were amazing. And then Rhonda said she was going to, she said, thank you so much. And she's going to be checking out your site in the morning. She might have been on her way home from work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pam.
Yeah.
We're working on a 2024 calendar.
Yeah.
So if you've got watchers that are looking for something new for Houston, it's got a lot of our trips from this year. Yeah. We went to Egypt and we've been to Turkey twice. And Portugal. Yeah, so there'll be pictures in 2024.
So you're going to put them up and sell them on your website?
Yes. They'll be.
Maybe 7 with that.
Yep, hopefully within the next few days.
That's right.
Well, very nice. Very good. And Pam said if you guys go on a cruise, you have to come back and let us know what you think of it.
Okay.
Okay, Pam. I will.
Yep, that's a deal.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody that joined us today. And we appreciate our audience very much. Again, thanks very much to our guests, because it was so nice having them here. We're like you. The more we learn about each other and the more we learn about the challenges. Oh, and Rhonda says she can't wait to see the calendar. Rhonda Jacobs. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, to be told before, not get of it, not. May I get business, but I got in a minute. Give me up.
Yep, for 2024.
That's right.
You're right.
Yep. All right. Well, very nice. Okay, we'll say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see everybody next week. I'll be here. We'll be talking. I think right now the plan is next week we're going to talk about the some of the things we saw at the Abilities Expo. Charlotte spent a day and a half there, and so we got to play with a lot of cool stuff. Cheryl drove some of the same stuff she drove last year, but she drove some new stuff. That's her thing. So we'll let everybody know that's what we'll talk about next week, and we'll say goodbye. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Have a good guys.
Rhonda Wilson said, keep up the good work.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Yeah.